a higher standard of any truth is whether it is, in fact, the truth that bears a resemblance to something that is good. And I know that that sounds ambiguous because you could say, well, you know, an axe murderer, it's true he was an axe murderer, and that's not good. No, that's true, but it also means we created an axe murderer as a society. You're asking a lot of hard questions, young man.
Every little kid is taught that they shouldn't talk to strangers. I mean, do you talk to strangers? How do you know if a stranger is worth speaking to? Hey, kid, don't talk to strangers. Where's my daughter at? I'm gonna go get my daughter in here in a minute and tell her she's 3 weeks old, but she needs to know this.
I think we have to go through life trying to imagine what it's like to be the other point of view. More often than not, I come back to my own point of view anyway, but at least I try to understand it from the other side. And sometimes I even do. I actually see how things or people or circumstances or societies or cultures end up the way they do. So you said we're having a massive dialogue, partly as a result of social media. I would disagree for one reason. I think that a dialogue consists of two parties, two individuals, two people, even two groups, expressing their opinions in a method whereby each listens to the other and responds. I think what social media does is actually the opposite. I think that too often people go on there and just rage their own opinion. They're not actually listening to another side or to anything. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's not a dialogue. Ding, ding, ding. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Because it takes an open mind, or what I would call an elastic mind. A mind or a person or something that has no way to see the other side, that absolutely cannot imagine, that can't for a second sustain the possibility that there is another reality, that's a very dangerous mind. That's a very dangerous and unfortunate place to be.
I do have a
Okay.
firearm
Okay.
on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
He's licensed. He's licensed to carry. He was trying to get out his ID and his wallet out his pocket, and he let the officer know that he had a firearm and he was reaching for his wallet.
First things first, I think it's the best, single, most powerful use of the tool is to expose, I'm not just going to say police, but the different ways that we as a society live in the same society, but experience completely different realities. And that's actually, to me, the best part about social media and the technology.
He just shot his arm off. We got pulled over on Larpener.
I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license. Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
I grew up in East LA, which is considered a barrio or a ghetto. So my experience with the police by the time I was 30 had been that I'd been pulled over countless times, I mean innumerable times, for all for completely made up, reasons. Everything from, your back window is punched out, so we thought you stole the car, And I'm like, it's my car. I know, it got broken into, you know. That's what happens in poor neighborhoods. My experience had been such that my interactions with the police were emblematic of my entire society and culture that I grew up in. My boss, who was a white male in his 60s by then, said that he'd been pulled over once. He lived in a nice neighborhood, he drove a nice car, and so he had a very good opinion of the police. And I thought, you know, if I had his experience, I probably would too. And so I remember how it sort of opened a door for me into, oh, we're talking about the same police department. It's just his experience versus my experience. And so I could understand how he thinks that when he sees people being shot or hurt on TV, it's an anomaly to his experience. It's anomalous to his experience. But when I see something like that, it's absolutely, business as usual.
Talk to this fucking nigga right now. I am telling you, he's video recorded me. He scared the shit out of Anthony. Started in the car. He wanted to run his mouth talking about BB and the trashy mother. Fucking say something to him now.
Said that.
He's got me on videotape, and I'm still flipping the fuck out.
You called me a nigger. Go ahead.
I called you a nigger. You're a nigger.
You know, if you grow up, it's sort of like I can understand kids who grow up, let's say in a very racially intolerant household, and they grow up to be racially intolerant. I can understand that. It makes sense. It's unfortunate, and it's sad, and it's potentially, it's not potentially, it's extremely destructive to society as a whole, but I'm not their parents. And so I understand how they got there, but they need help.
She's crying.
I think that one's gonna fit you. We got a good size for you.
We're gonna get the bum buster on it. Oh,
Groups like the NRA conflate the right to own guns with freedom. And so they've sort of taken a very rudimentary approach, which unfortunately goes in on people's very sort of primal survival brain. And so there's not a lot of careful analysis of facts and information.
We are witnesses to the most ruthless attack on a president and the people who voted for him, and the free system that allowed it to happen in American history. From the highest levels of government to their media, universities, and billionaires, their hateful defiance of his legitimacy is an insult to each of us. But the ultimate insult is that they think we're so stupid that we'll let them get away with it. These saboteurs slashing away with their leaks and sneers, their phony accusations and gagging sanctimony, drive their daggers through the heart of our future, poisoning our belief that honest custody of our institutions will ever again be possible, so they can then build their utopia from the ashes of what they burned down. No, their fate will be failure, and they will perish in the political flames of their own fires. We are the National Rifle Association of America, and we are freedom's safest place.
It's an unwillingness to look at facts and data and to make a clear analysis. And clearly, we don't need to own assault rifles that can fire 100 bullets per minute, and then fit them or retrofit them with, various stocks and things to make them fire even more. It's not logical. You're not going to hunt a deer by shooting it 100 times.
Oh my God! Not about gun laws right now. That's another fight, another battle. Let's fix the schools, and then you guys can battle it out whatever you want. But we need our children safe.
I knew he had 5 or 6. I don't know what kind they were. It didn't matter what kind of guns they were. I have guns. I respect guns, as long as they're handled properly.
I don't understand that. That part doesn't make sense to me. If you've been in and out of mental institutions all your life and you've displayed an attitude of disharmony with the government or with black people or with anybody, and you can just walk into a gun show and buy an assault rifle tomorrow without even showing anyone a driver's license, I think that as a society, that's not a very bright decision we've made legislatively to allow that to occur.
And you thought it was fine for a 19-year-old to have an AR-15?
It's his right to have it.
Do you feel any differently about that now?
No.
As long as society is convinced that that's more important than the safety of children, let's say, then these things will continue to occur, and I'm not surprised by them anymore. I'm actually just thinking, well, that's the price of freedom, the one that you discussed earlier, in this country. And when I said, I gave you an answer that was very cryptic. I said, we're lucky, but not as lucky as we think we are. That's one of the reasons.
Now, I'm not saying that you love the tragedy, but I am saying that you love the ratings.
What's the cost of living the way we do? I think the cost of living the way we do is mass shootings, getting used to regular mass shootings. That's one. I think another one is normalizing a president like the one we have now.
America is far less safe, and the world is far less stable than when Obama made the decision to put Hillary Clinton in charge of America's foreign policy.
I always thought that Republicans just had slightly different values and that we were part of the same system and could agree or disagree on various points, but the place where we are now as a nation has, to me, utterly and absolutely changed the face of the Republican Party to a point where I don't know if it's possible to repair, and I don't know if those responsible for things like that are capable of it anymore because of the mass and grave abdication of responsibility.
Another mass murder in France. A large truck plowed through a crowd.
I am seeing major cities in Europe starting to ramp up their security.
I believe it's a world war now. It's no longer just isolated ISIS attacks.
But to have someone who has been the leader of the party make fun of the handicapped, denigrate women, brag about sexual violence, and the party just sort of, he's our guy, Really?
A change in leadership is required to produce a change in outcomes.
And I agree with you. That was a really good analogy, the BDSM, because it's very, Donald Trump has a swagger, I will admit, but it's a swagger that a bully has.
I get a kick. I was watching a politician, weak, ineffective politician last night. I'll tell you his name, but I don't want to embarrass anybody.
Unfortunately, that type of swagger, again, goes in on that very kind of primal, animalistic brain that people have that go, oh, daddy's here to save us.
We've lost our jobs like we're a bunch of babies. They've gone to other countries. They've gone to Mexico. They've gone to many other countries. China's taking massive advantage of us. It's all so easy, believe me.
There's just too much about people who go so heavy and just go all in, let's say, to use a poker term, into that personality and into that realm, into where you have to absolutely dominate, bully, and win every situation.
I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it.
For an electorate to identify with a billionaire who essentially never worked a day in his life, but has cheated people his entire life and behaved in ways most of us would consider socially unacceptable, if not abhorrent. For an electorate to identify with him as one of them, then something must have happened. There must have been some effective use of myth or mythology or salesmanship to create that bond. And I think the only thing that can turn that around and that will turn it around and why we are where we're at today has a lot to do with education. Because if you have, and if you're taught from a young age to think for yourself and to analyze information and to draw your own conclusions, then clearly you can see the man behind the curtain, so to speak, and to use the Wizard of Oz analogy.
If Jesus Christ gets down off the cross and told me Trump is with Russia, I would tell him, hold on a second, I need to check with the president if it's true.
I think it's part of human nature that we want to believe that there's something bigger. I think that's actually part of the crux of the matter. And that as a people from time immemorial, that we've always wanted to believe. And that's why, Native people worship the corn god or the sun god, or, I think that there's something within us that wants to be part of something greater. I think we have to go back to maybe even someone like Joseph Campbell or The Power of Myth, because it serves a collective consciousness to validate our belief systems. If we can take a struggling young lad or a girl with no opportunities and raise them up, and they worked 3 jobs and they went to college and they educated themselves, and then they went to the Marines or West Point or somewhere, and they came out and they became, and you see these stories all the time, and they're nice. I'm actually very proud of those people. They worked very hard. But the number of people who don't have that opportunity and who grow up in completely different circumstances, who have even no concept that there's a world outside of that housing project or that 4-block area they live in, that's who I'm concerned about, because their impact on society will be great, especially if they have access to assault rifles, which we're guaranteeing them.
Okay, so you still want the schools to be gun-free zones, except for the teachers?
I think schools have to be protected like every other large gathering place.
Should you really hire someone as the Secretary of Education who never went to a public school, who is an avowed opponent of public education? That doesn't make sense. You see what I mean? There's a kind of disconnect between what we're doing as a society and what we believe in, what we really believe in. There's a disconnect.
I've not intentionally visited schools that are underperforming.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should.
I actually think that the electorate that voted for someone like Trump really does want the best, that they are good people. I wouldn't categorize them as anything but really doing what they think is best. Unfortunately, The system has failed them if they decided to make a choice like that. We have failed them.
But I ask again about our priorities. The amount of money that we're talking about now, roughly $10 million over a period of years, we spent in the first few minutes of our activity in Libya.
We created a system whereby you know, when I was a kid, intellectual meant smart, meant a good thing. Yep. Now, an intellectual is somehow an elitist or a member of an other class, somehow to be differentiated from oneself, as opposed to something one should aspire to.
What has survived of the great civilizations of this world? The only thing that has survived has been the creative product of the minds of men and women throughout history.
Society is organized around culture. In other words, we don't say, oh, next Thursday we're celebrating Bank of America's raising a 1/4% interest day. And so we're all going to dress up in our Bank of America raising a 1/4% interest uniforms and dance around the Bank of America pole.
It is undeniable that what we invest, the small amount we invest in supporting our creative genius, will be paid back many, many times over.
So the role of culture, and by that I mean the arts, all of the arts, writing, music, dance, theater, architecture, hell, I've seen people twist balloons into things that I thought were quite artistic. Each of them fall within this realm or on this scale of creative expression that I think is vital for what it's worth. I like that too. I like the way you put that. I think it's important to keep in mind always that people are more often good than bad. That they're most interested in the greater good, however obscured it may be at the moment. And that if you could just, maybe you even have to take the time to get over not only your own biases and preconceptions, but maybe over theirs as well. So you kind of have to take responsibility for both of you sometimes in that moment. But if you can, then I think there's a definite payoff on the other side.
Thank you very much for today. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
For sharing your thoughts with me.
My pleasure.